What happens when the greatest threat to a village is not the enemy outside its walls, but the authorities standing inside them? As Mamushi's invasion spirals out of control, Konoha is pushed into a corner where hesitation becomes a luxury no one can afford. While chaos spreads across the village, a far more dangerous battle quietly unfolds behind closed doors, one fought with manipulation, sacrifice, and impossible choices. Kobu believes absolute power and rigid logic will bring order. KASHIN KOJI believes survival demands ruthless efficiency. Caught between them is Inajin, forced into a role no one his generation was ever meant to play. This is no longer about right or wrong, but about whether the village can endure decisions made in the shadows, long before the enemy delivers the final blow. Before we go any further, make sure you smash that subscribe button, drop a like, and flood the comments with your thoughts so we can keep this anime storytelling hype alive together. Alright, let's waste no time and jump straight into it. Here we go. This chapter delivers an intense and highly engaging experience, as Mamushi's invasion grows far more complicated than expected. Not only does the situation escalate, but Mamushi also appears to gain new support, even as KASHIN KOJI finally steps in to deal with the threat. As usual, we will break down and analyze all the major events that unfold in this chapter. Without wasting any time, let's dive straight into the discussion. Chapter 30 is titled Disruption, a name that perfectly reflects the massive trouble now facing the main characters. The cover illustration features Mamushi surrounded by countless clones, emphasizing just how overwhelming and troublesome this enemy has become. On a personal note, Mamushi's character design and the narrative direction so far feel fresh and distinctive. It can even be considered one of the most original arcs presented in the series. The cover also includes a line hinting that endless madness is drawing closer, setting a dark and unsettling tone right from the start. The story opens by explaining that Team 10 initially managed to push Mamushi into a corner. However, the problem quickly became clear. The moment they let their guard down, the Shinju began multiplying at an absurd speed. In the previous chapter, the combined attacks of Inajin and Shikadai seemed to land solid hits on several Shinju. Unfortunately, those strikes were not enough to eliminate them completely. Feeling confident, Shikadai briefly praised Chocho for a job well done, only for her to casually reply that it felt easy. That was precisely when the Shinju reacted, almost as if they were offended, and started multiplying even faster than before. Chocho immediately sensed something was wrong and warned everyone that the enemies were not fully defeated. Soon after, Himawari shouted a warning to the team and prepared to launch an attack. She began gathering chakra to fire a Baijidama, a moment that was nothing short of insane. This scene also proved that Himawari's training had paid off, as she could now unleash such a devastating technique on her own. That said, it was clear her judgment was still lacking. Shikadai quickly stopped her, reminding her that they were still inside the village. He used his shadow technique to restrain the Mamushi and instructed Chocho to throw them into the air. Using her immense strength, Chocho launched the enemies upward while calling out the timing. Once the targets were airborne, Himawari finally released the Baijidama, which slammed directly into the cluster of Shinju and caused a massive, terrifying explosion. Even though she executed the technique with apparent ease, the destructive power of the Baijidama remained overwhelming. Everyone was left stunned by the sheer scale of the blast. After the explosion, Chocho realized just how dangerous the situation had been. Himawari also understood that she had acted recklessly and immediately apologized. Shikadai then scolded her firmly, reminding her that they would not always be there to protect her. With power like that, Himawari needed to become more disciplined, because even a small mistake could be fatal, especially if help arrived too late. Granting such immense power to someone with so little experience is undeniably risky. Just moments ago, nearly half of Konoha had been affected by the blast. While it might look absurd at a glance, the reality of the situation was extremely serious. Unfortunately, the crisis was far from over. Shikadai realized that despite taking down many Mamushi, their numbers were still nowhere near depleted. He pointed out that countless mamushi were still roaming around and questioned just how many of them actually existed. The story then shifts to Inajin and KASHIN KOJI, where Inajin anxiously notes that no matter how many enemies they defeat, the Shinju keep appearing endlessly, in fact increasing in number. The scene moves deeper into the village, where Kobu orders that the Hokage be taken in for interrogation. KASHIN strongly opposes this decision. At that moment, Sai arrives with a report stating that the enemy has already infiltrated the village, leaving Kobu visibly shocked. Sai explains that the intruders are Shinju and adds that there have also been reports of Boruto's appearance. Although security in the area is tight, Sai emphasizes that complete safety cannot be guaranteed. He suggests halting the investigation temporarily and relocating Kobu to the evacuation zone. However, Kobu demands more detailed information about the threat and the enemy's objectives. Sai responds that they are still investigating whether these foes are truly Shinju and how dangerous they might be. Hearing this, Kobu confidently refuses evacuation and insists on continuing the investigation, believing it is too early to retreat. This decision leaves everyone speechless, including KASHIN, who cannot comprehend Kobu's line of thinking. With a firm tone, Kobu ends the discussion and orders that the Hokage be escorted as planned. The story then returns to the outskirts of Konoha, where the number of Shinju continues to skyrocket. Villagers begin to notice the strange creatures and question what is really happening. Inajin even remarks that their numbers have surpassed 100, to the point where he can no longer count them individually. The focus shifts to Delta, who is flying above and surveying the situation from the air. Sarada, positioned nearby, asks if Delta can see anything. Delta replies that she has a clear view and that the enemy numbers are enormous. Sarada quickly confirms the information, reporting that she is located in the northern section of Sector B and that Mamushi has been detected. Sarada immediately declares her intention to move in and confront the enemy. However, before she can act, SHIKAMARU stops her and orders all teams to hold their positions. According to him, the original plan was to eliminate Mamushi while their numbers were still manageable. Unfortunately, the situation has completely changed. Mamushi is now multiplying at an uncontrollable rate, spreading across a wider area, signaling that the battle has entered an entirely new phase. Upon hearing that decision, Inajin began to wonder what their next move should be. SHIKAMARU, however, responded in a calm and confident tone, telling everyone not to panic. He assured them that the situation was still within his calculations, and that their strategy would simply need to be adjusted. The good news was that, so far, there had been no reports of civilian casualties. Any damage caused was limited to minor structural destruction. This matched the information SHIKAMARU had received earlier. As long as they were not treated as primary targets and did not strike first, Mamushi tended to ignore anything else. Unfortunately, before SHIKAMARU could explain his revised plan in detail, an urgent call came in from the sensor unit. They informed him that Kobu had summoned him and demanded his immediate presence in the interrogation room. Internally, SHIKAMARU was clearly irritated, questioning why this had to happen at such a critical moment. He attempted a polite refusal, explaining that he was currently occupied and requesting that the meeting be postponed. Kobu, however, left no room for negotiation. Speaking firmly, he reminded SHIKAMARU that he was acting as the direct representative of the Fire Country's daimyo. The order he carried was the daimyo's will itself, and SHIKAMARU was warned not to keep him waiting. SHIKAMARU tried to calmly explain the situation, stressing that the village was under attack and that the circumstances were extremely urgent. Kobu responded coldly, claiming that SHIKAMARU failed to understand the true priorities. According to him, ignoring the daimyo's command would bring far more severe consequences upon the village. At that point, Kobu's attitude only made the tension more unbearable and infuriating. Meanwhile, Inajin grew anxious when communication with SHIKAMARU suddenly cut off. He wondered what was really happening. KASHIN KOJI then explained that the man in question held authority second only to the daimyo and was now demanding to interrogate SHIKAMARU in person. The story then shifts to Boruto, who reports that the southern area of Sector D has been secured and that he intends to regroup with Team 10 in the southern zone. Shikamaru's response is brief, ordering Boruto to stand by and hold his position until further instructions are given. Boruto asks if everything is alright, but before the conversation can continue, he is suddenly struck by a ninja weapon and knocked to the ground. One of the Konoha ninja immediately reports that they have successfully hit him, declaring that the traitor, Boruto, has been captured in the southern sector. The ninja also notice the presence of numerous shinju nearby, likely remnants from Boruto's earlier confrontation. They proceed to confiscate Boruto's katana, unaware that the sword possesses a special effect. The moment one of them touches it, his strength is instantly drained, leaving him confused and panicked. Seizing that opportunity, Boruto activates the Flying Thunder God technique and escapes with ease. It becomes obvious that Boruto's level far surpasses that of ordinary ninja. Though mocked as a master liar, Boruto explains that his earlier words were meant to protect them. He warns that if they ever encounter Shinju, the best option is to run, because forcing a fight would only lead to pointless loss of life. After that, Boruto quickly leaves the area, while the Konoha ninja can do nothing but curse in frustration. Capturing Boruto is clearly beyond their current capabilities. Back inside the village, the number of Mamushi continues to rise without stopping. They begin halting and interrogating anyone they come across. In this chaotic situation, Shikamaru reconnects with Sarada and asks for an update on the battlefield. Sarada reports that Mamushi appear to be acting erratically, as if they are searching for Ida, but their movements lack coordination and any clear pattern. Shikamaru instructs her to keep observing and to report immediately if there are any significant changes. This observation aligns with a crucial fact. The greater the number of Mamushi, the lower their level of intelligence becomes. That is why, as Sarada noted, Mamushi are now moving without strategy, wandering aimlessly in search of targets. As the conversation ends, Shikamaru informs Inajin that he will be heading to the interrogation room for the time being. Shikamaru calmly states that he must deal directly with Lord Kobu. This declaration shocks Inajin, as Shikamaru is the mastermind behind their entire operation against Mamushi. If he leaves, mission coordination will undoubtedly suffer. Shikamaru adds that he will be unable to monitor the transmission map for a while. Inajin immediately protests, pointing out that without Shikamaru, their overall plan cannot function properly. Shikamaru simply replies that he is fully aware of that fact. He offers two options. Inajin can relay enemy positions verbally, or temporarily take over command. Hearing this, Inajin firmly states that assuming command is not a realistic option. Shikamaru then provides additional information. Several Mamushi clones have already begun roaming near the Hokage's office. He believes that once Kobu truly grasps the level of danger they are facing, he will be forced to reconsider his stance. Even so, Shikamaru admits that Kobu is not the type of person who backs down easily. Amid the tension, KASHIN KOJI approaches Shikamaru and instructs him to hide a small toad inside his pocket. Shikamaru grows suspicious and asks whether KASHIN KOJI has already prepared a plan. The answer remains vague, but it is enough to suggest that something is in motion. Boruto, who overhears the exchange, understands all too well that whenever KASHIN KOJI makes a move, it is almost always dangerous, yet highly effective. Shortly after, KASHIN KOJI speaks directly to Inajin and asks him to temporarily shut down the transmission. Inajin hesitates, knowing that cutting the transmission would disrupt communication for the entire team. KASHIN KOJI insists that there is no other choice. If they want to overcome this obstacle, Inajin must use a jutsu different from his usual one. Although he still does not fully understand KASHIN KOJI's plan, Inajin ultimately follows the instruction. The focus then returns to the interrogation room, where Shikamaru finally arrives. Kobu greets him with a sarcastic tone, complaining about the long wait. Shikamaru responds coldly, once again emphasizing that the village is in a state of emergency and urging that the interrogation be concluded quickly so he can return to his duties. Kobu pressures Shikamaru instead, stating that Shikamaru's future position lies entirely in his hands. He openly admits that he has been suspicious of Shikamaru from the very beginning, accusing him of being the one who allowed Boruto to escape. Shikamaru rejects the accusation and challenges Kobu to explain the basis of such suspicion. With complete confidence, Kobu claims that his deductions are rarely wrong and that he merely needs time to gather solid evidence. He even advises Shikamaru to confess honestly, suggesting that doing so would reduce the severity of the punishment. According to Kobu, this approach would resolve everything quickly, which he assumes is exactly what Shikamaru wants as well. Just as the situation seems to reach a dead end, KASHIN KOJI finally puts his plan into motion. He signals Inajin to act immediately. Inajin activates the mind-body switch technique, using KASHIN KOJI's toad as the medium, and directs the jutsu straight at Kobu. The method is extreme, but under these emergency circumstances, it is also logical. As a result, Kobu collapses to the floor, startling Sai. However, Sai believes Shikamaru had nothing to do with it and assumes he is merely witnessing an unexpected incident. Step by step, the plan proves successful. Inajin's consciousness successfully transfers and takes control of Kobu's body. Confused, Sai asks whether Kobu is alright. Unintentionally, Inajin, now inhabiting Kobu's body, addresses him as father. That small slip nearly exposes everything. Inajin quickly realizes his mistake and complains about an intense headache. Shikamaru immediately understands what has happened. He knows that Inajin has used a mental transfer jutsu and is now controlling Kobu. The toad that Shikamaru had hidden earlier hops closer to Kobu, signaling that it is time for them to leave the room. Speaking in Kobu's voice, Inajin declares that he is tired of the interrogation and wants to step outside for some fresh air. This request only heightens Sai's suspicion, though he begins to piece together the truth. Inajin also insists that he does not need an escort and orders everyone to remain where they are, stating that he will return shortly. Once outside, Inajin lets out a deep breath and admits that the situation was incredibly tense. He then asks what he is supposed to do next. KASHIN KOJI responds briefly, instructing him to head to the rooftop. Inajin is confused and begins questioning the risks of such a move, especially with Mamushi capable of appearing at any moment. He also worries about what might happen to Kobu's body. KASHIN KOJI then delivers a chilling order in a grave tone: eliminate Kobu. The command leaves Inajin completely stunned. Back inside the room, Sai continues to wonder what is truly happening. Shikamaru apologizes and explains that he must leave immediately to manage the village crisis. Sai stops him and demands an explanation for whatever plan he and Inajin are carrying out. No lengthy explanation is needed. The situation itself makes it clear that Sai already understands what is going on. He admits that he was initially shocked, but realized the truth the moment he looked into Kobu's eyes. From that alone, Sai becomes certain that Inajin's consciousness transfer jutsu was used. In a serious tone, he directly asks Shikamaru what the real objective behind all of this is. Meanwhile, the focus returns to Inajin and KASHIN KOJI. KASHIN KOJI continues giving cold, extreme instructions. He suggests that if necessary, Inajin could even jump off the building and pretend to panic during a Mamushi attack. As long as the primary target is eliminated, any method would be justified. Hearing this, Inajin is visibly shaken, unsure whether KASHIN KOJI is joking. However, KASHIN KOJI shows no sign of humor. He firmly states that there is no time to debate morality. In situations like this, everything must be approached rationally. To him, Kobu is clearly an enemy. There is no active transmission, no witnesses, and no evidence. Whatever happens will be known only to the two of them. Inajin can only call the plan insane, questioning KASHIN KOJI's sanity. At that very moment, a Mamushi suddenly appears and casually asks whether they know the whereabouts of a woman named Ida. KASHIN KOJI immediately seizes this opportunity. Without hesitation, he launches a direct attack on the Mamushi. It is important to remember that Mamushi remain passive unless provoked. Once attacked, however, the situation shifts instantly. The Mamushi begins multiplying while issuing threats, asking whether KASHIN KOJI truly wants to die. KASHIN KOJI responds calmly, as if this turn of events aligns perfectly with his intentions. The chapter closes with a striking statement: goals cannot always be achieved through ideal methods. The question now is whether Inajin will act based on logic or follow the voice of his conscience. Overall, this chapter leaves a powerful impression. KASHIN Koji's extreme decisions perfectly reflect the mindset of a true ninja. The risks are enormous, including the possibility of killing the second most powerful figure beneath the daimyo, yet the scale of the invasion may be enough to justify such actions. From the beginning, Kobu has shown little genuine concern for the village's safety and has been willing to gamble Konoha's fate for his own interests. This is precisely what makes Kobu such a frustrating character. He never truly grasps the severity of the threat facing the village and remains focused on proving himself right, even if it means sacrificing Konoha. From this perspective, KASHIN Koji's reasoning becomes far more understandable. To him, Kobu has already crossed the line into enemy territory. Logically speaking, the plan makes sense, but there is one major issue. Inajin is not the type of person capable of going that far. If this task were given to Sai, he would likely carry it out without hesitation, given his dark past. Inajin, however, belongs to a much gentler generation, making it far more likely that he will try to save Kobu by any means necessary. There is a strong chance that Inajin will release Kobu, and through that experience, Kobu will finally realize how serious the Mamushi threat truly is. Until now, he has treated the situation lightly. But once he sees hundreds of Mamushi surrounding the village with his own eyes, he may finally stop pressuring Shikamaru and acknowledge his mistake. That said, if KASHIN Koji's plan truly unfolds as intended, the consequences would be massive, and Inajin's inner conflict could become one of the most compelling points in the story. Imagine Inajin actually taking someone's life. Sai would almost certainly be drawn into the aftermath, given his own history with morally dark decisions. On the other hand, the Mamushi threat continues to spiral out of control. Their numbers are increasing at an alarming rate, something Shikamaru had predicted from the very beginning. Mamushi's greatest weakness lies in their low intelligence, which presents an opportunity to turn the tide. It is highly likely that Shikamaru is deliberately holding back their trump card, Sarada's power. Her technique essentially functions like a selective black hole, allowing her to choose exactly what gets pulled in. This is precisely why the ability has not been used yet. Its range is clearly limited, and activating the Mangekyo cannot be done recklessly. The most reasonable strategy is to gather all Mamushi into a single location and then unleash Sarada's power at the perfect moment. That is why Shikamaru is still waiting for the right timing, ensuring that the attack is not wasted. For now, the situation remains utterly chaotic. However, moving forward, it is very likely that Kobu will no longer stand in the way, either because he is removed, or because he finally realizes that Mamushi pose a genuine threat to Konoha and the entire nation. Thanks a lot for staying with me till the end. If you have any questions or ideas, write them down below. See you in the next one.